When PSG owner Nasser Al-Khelaifi mocks Kylian Mbappé in front of international media, no one expects the World Cup champion to do the unthinkable. What followed would ignite a firestorm in European football, shake loyalty at its core, and expose secrets PSG tried to bury. What if I just walk away right now, in front of them all? Kylian Mbappe's voice sliced through the press room like a razor, just loud enough to silence every camera shutter, every muffled laugh, every whispered scandal. He didn't blink. He didn't smile. He stared directly at Nasser Al-Khelaifi, his jaw clenched, his fingers twitching on the edge of the microphone. Nasser leaned back in his chair, smirking like a monarch amused by a court jester's tantrum. "Go ahead," he said with a chuckle, his Arabic-French accent thick with contempt. "Show the world how fragile you really are." Gasps erupted from the room. Cameras clicked. The head of PSG had just challenged his golden boy to walk out on a live international broadcast. Kylian didn't move. His chest rose and fell like a war drum. Behind his eyes, something cracked. Not from humiliation, but from the weight of years of silence, of being used as a symbol, a pawn, a billboard. He wasn't just Kylian Mbappé, football genius. He was a product, and Nasser had just thrown him under the bus publicly. Across the room, Luis Campos shot up from his chair, eyes wide, but froze when Kylian raised a single hand. "Don't interfere. I've bled for this club," Kylian said, each word measured like a sniper's shot. "I carried your badge when it meant nothing. I stayed when Madrid begged. I gave you my legacy. And this is how you treat me." Nasser's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. "Your ego is your greatest goal, Kylian. It scores more than your feet ever could." The press roared, some stunned, some delighted. It was a circus. But to Kylian, it felt like betrayal in its rawest, most intimate form. And it wasn't just about football. Because behind those cold PSG walls, there were secrets. Secrets about the deal he signed 2 years ago. The closed-door meetings. The unkept promises. The threats. The truth about why his family's phone was tapped. Why his mother cried the night before his renewal announcement. Why Hakimi suddenly pulled away. Why Lionel left without a Real goodbye. But this mockery in front of the entire world was the first time Nasser had underestimated how deep the wound went. Kylian stood up slowly, dragging the chair's metal legs against the glossy floor. The sound was deliberate, a warning. He looked at every journalist in the room. French, Spanish, British, Qatari, before locking eyes again with the man who thought he owned him. "Next time you joke," Kylian said, voice calm, "make sure you're not sitting on a bomb." He turned and walked out. Not from the press room, from PSG, and chaos followed. In the hallway, Fabian, his longtime bodyguard, whispered, "Was that planned?" Kylian didn't answer. His mind was replaying everything. Nasser's smirk, the scripted questions from media, the uneasy silence of his teammates in the front row. Just days ago, he'd found the letter. The one slipped under his hotel door in Munich. Handwritten, and unmistakably real. "They're watching your mother's clinic again." Nasser signed off on it. The cameras are back. He couldn't sleep after that. Could barely eat. He confronted Nasser 2 nights ago in the VIP suite. Nasser had laughed it off. "Security," he said, swirling his wine. "You of all people should understand surveillance." But this was not security. This was control. Mbappé took the elevator down to the parking garage, Fabian close behind. His phone was buzzing non-stop. Texts from Neymar, from his lawyer, from Macron's private number. He ignored them all. By the time he reached his armored BMW, his decision was clear. Not just to leave PSG, but to expose them. And he wouldn't do it alone. In a dimly lit cafe in Le Marais, a figure waited for him. Hoodie up, face hidden. A former player. One who knew exactly how far Al-Khelaifi's influence reached. "You sure you're ready to go to war?" the man asked as Kylian sat down. Mbappé didn't blink. "I've already started it." He pulled out a USB. "The documents are real," he said. "And the footage, some of it dates back to before I even signed the extension. You know what that means? The man leaned in, his voice a whisper. "It means you're not the first." Kylian nodded. "I just might be the last." And that night, the server room inside PSG headquarters experienced a fire that mysteriously wiped years of internal footage. But by then, copies had already been made, stored offshore, encrypted, ready. This wasn't about a transfer anymore. This was about survival, about truth. And as the Eiffel Tower glittered in the distance, Nasser Al-Khelaifi sat in his glass-walled penthouse, watching the news spin out of control. He didn't laugh this time, because deep down he knew he'd finally pushed Mbappé too far. "You used my father's illness as leverage?" Kylian's voice trembled, not with weakness, but with fury he could no longer bottle. The dimly lit cafe flickered with the glow of cheap candles, but the air between them felt like dry gunpowder. Across the table, the man in the hoodie finally took it off, revealing the familiar face of Blaise Matuidi, eyes older, scarred by betrayal, but still burning with defiance. "They told me if I spoke to you, they'd bury my family's name in the tabloids," Blaise muttered, glancing over his shoulder. "But I watched your press conference. I saw that bastard smirk. That was my breaking point." Kylian leaned back, his hands clenching the edges of the table. "I should have left when Real came for me. Everyone said it was my ego that made me stay. But it wasn't. You thought you were building something. I thought I mattered." The door chimed behind them, and for a second both men froze. But it was just a waiter. The tension dropped an inch, only to rise again with the weight of what they were about to unleash. "They had you followed too, didn't they?" Blaise asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Kylian nodded. "Since 2021, the night of my mother's car accident. I found out later it wasn't an accident. Brakes were cut. She survived because she was running late. And when I tried to open a case, they shut it down? Faster than I could finish the report." Silence. Then, from Blaise, a bitter laugh. "Same with me. I tried to report Al-Khelaifi's brother for laundering through shell companies tied to the academy. They said if I didn't stop, I'd never work in Europe again. Guess what happened next? Juventus mysteriously pulled their contract extension." Kylian's fists tightened. "They act like we're their property. We are. To them." The USB drive sat between them like a loaded weapon. Kylian picked it up and slid it into his jacket. "I've sent copies to a few people outside France. If anything happens to me, they'll go public." "Good, because it's going to get ugly." Later that night, at the Al Thani estate in Doha, Nasser Al-Khelaifi was pacing in his private study. The room, lined with rare Quran manuscripts and oil paintings of European stadiums, was unusually quiet until his phone buzzed. "Do you know where he is?" he snapped, not waiting for the caller to greet him. The voice on the other end was calm. Too calm. "He's already met with Matuidi, and I think he's talking to someone inside UEFA." Nasser's lips curled. "He's bluffing. He wants attention." The voice paused, then explained the footage leaked to El País 2 hours ago. Nasser froze. "What footage?" "The one showing your head of security threatening Kylian's mother at the clinic parking lot. There's audio. She's crying, Nasser, saying she'll pull him out of the team. It's dated 3 months before his renewal." A pin could have dropped in that silence. Pull the lawyers. File injunctions. Every country. It's already mirrored in Iceland, Singapore, Brazil. You can't erase it this time. The phone call ended. Nasser stared into the glass wall of his study, the reflection of himself warped and broken. Not long ago, he was the unchallenged king of European club politics. Now, a boy he once called his greatest asset had become his most dangerous enemy. Meanwhile, in an apartment near the Seine, Kylian stared at the television screen as the footage played on international news. His mother's voice trembled through the speakers. The security guard's threats were cold and clinical. "Withdraw from the renewal or we'll bring up your past, your husband's medical records, your son's private negotiations with Madrid. You're not as invisible as you think, madam." Kylian turned it off. His mother sat beside him, quiet, her hands wrapped around a chipped mug of tea she hadn't touched. She didn't need to say anything. Her silence was a cathedral of pain. "Why didn't you tell me back then?" Kylian asked, his voice raw. "Because you would have stayed to protect me," she replied. "And I couldn't let that happen." The rage that had brewed inside him exploded not outward, but inward. It broke him in places no camera could capture. He didn't want revenge. He wanted freedom. He wanted peace. He wanted the world to see what really happened behind the glimmering PSG sponsorships, the curated Instagram posts, the gold-trimmed locker rooms. He stood up, walked over to the window. The Eiffel Tower was blinking in the distance. "You don't have to fight them," his mother whispered behind him. "You're not their prisoner anymore." Kylian turned. "No, I was never their prisoner." He pulled out his phone. In his drafts was a message that would split the football world in half. "I will no longer wear the badge of silence. Here is the truth about Paris Saint-Germain." But before he posted, another message came in. An unknown number. "If you go forward with this, someone close to you will disappear. Just like Serge. Just like the accountant. Think carefully, K." He stared at it. A chill crawled down his spine. And just then, his doorbell rang. 3 times. Slowly. Deliberately. He wasn't alone anymore. The doorbell rang again. Once. Then twice more. Each chime a gunshot in the silence of Kylian's apartment. He didn't move. His mother clutched the edge of the sofa, her knuckles white, breath shallow. She looked at him with a fear that didn't need words. They both knew this wasn't press. This wasn't a fan. Kylian stepped toward the door, slow, deliberate. He didn't ask who it was. He knew whoever stood on the other side didn't come for conversation. He opened it a crack and froze. "Can I come in?" The voice was unmistakable. Calm, charismatic, always calculated. "Zinedine Zidane. What the hell are you doing here?" Kylian's voice was low, guarded, his hand still on the lock. Zidane didn't answer immediately. He stepped in without waiting for permission, closing the door behind him with a quiet click. "I heard the leak," he said, scanning the apartment like a man who already knew where the hidden cameras might be. "I also heard about the message. The threat." Zidane nodded. "They've sent it before. To me. To others. Most people delete it and move on. You didn't. That's why I'm here." Kylian narrowed his eyes. "Are you with them?" Zidane smiled. It wasn't warm. It wasn't kind. It was the smile of someone who had played this game far longer than Kylian had ever imagined. "Once. A long time ago. Before I realized the price of silence. I don't need riddles, Zinedine. I need to know why a man with your reputation is knocking on my door at midnight when my life is on the verge of collapse." Zidane pulled out his phone and placed it on the table. On the screen, footage of a meeting room in Zurich. FIFA executives. A blurry figure in a white suit speaking to a group of men. Nasser's voice unmistakable even through the low audio quality. "He's promising immunity to any official who discredits you publicly," Zidane said, pressing pause. "He wants to strip you of credibility. He's going to use that Madrid offer against you. Make it look like a failed blackmail attempt. That offer was real. I know, but he'll twist it. Say you begged to leave. Say you faked the leak. Say your mother orchestrated the footage. They're building a narrative, Kylian. And once it's out, the media won't care about your truth." Kylian sat down heavily. "So what am I supposed to do? Let it go? Delete the post and go back to pretending everything is fine?" "No," Zidane said. "You expose the rest. But not through social media." "How then?" "Live. Global. Press conference. You want them to panic? You do it where they can't mute you. Somewhere neutral. Geneva. Zurich. Even Rome. Bring documents. Names. Audio. Not just yours, others. Make it bigger than you." Kylian looked to his mother. She nodded slowly. "And if they try to stop me?" Zidane leaned in. "Then you'll finally know how far they're willing to go. And so will the world." The following morning, Nasser Al-Khelaifi arrived at Le Royal Monceau for a closed-door meeting with 2 senior UEFA delegates. His bodyguards flanked him like statues. His jaw was tight, his phone buzzing non-stop with crisis alerts from every continent. But what rattled him most was not the footage. It was the silence from Doha. Qatar had stopped answering his calls. He stormed into the suite, slamming the door behind him. The UEFA men stood slowly, unsure whether to greet or brace. "You've seen the leaks," Nasser snapped. "They're doctored." One of the men, a Swiss delegate named Rolf Schmid, shook his head. "We traced the timestamp. It's clean. Real." Then deny it publicly. Call it manipulation, deepfake, disinformation. "We can't. He has more. We've seen it. What do you want?" Nasser's voice cracked with desperation. "You want me to step down? Leave PSG? I've built this empire from nothing. He was a child when I brought him in." "He's not a child anymore," Rolf said. "And the world doesn't believe in silent kings." Meanwhile, Kylian was already on a private flight to Switzerland. Not a PSG jet. Not a French government jet. A private plane arranged by a former La Liga executive sympathetic to his cause. On board with him, his mother, Matuidi Zidane, and a digital forensic analyst from Spain who had spent the last 48 hours verifying everything. As the plane cut through the clouds, Kylian scrolled through the speech he'd written and deleted at least 20 times. "Don't read from a script," his mother said softly beside him. "Speak from your scars. They'll listen." He looked at her, and for the first time in months he smiled. At the Geneva World Conference Hall, a crowd of over 400 journalists gathered, cameras rolling, drones buzzing, screens lit with the words, "Kylian Mbappé, the truth." No one from PSG was in the building. As Kylian walked to the podium, the noise vanished. All that remained was breath, anticipation, history cracking open. He didn't start with football. He didn't mention goals, titles, or contracts. He said one name, Serge Benaissa. The room froze. That was the name of the man who handled PSG's internal financial records. He died 3 weeks after threatening to report irregularities to UEFA. The official cause was suicide. But I have footage, texts, and a voice memo from him to my mother saying, and I quote, "If anything happens to me, don't believe the headlines." Then he said another name, and another. He laid it bare. The intimidation, the surveillance, the cover-ups, the gag orders, the threats, the bribes. And finally, he played the audio. Nasser's voice, threatening his mother, mocking his injuries, laughing about burying stories with a few phone calls and a luxury watch. By the end, no one clapped, no one moved, because what Kylian Mbappé had done was not a press conference. It was a revolution. "Kylian, they're going to come for you now," Zidane said. Eyes locked on him as they stepped off the stage into the dim-lit corridor behind the Geneva Conference Hall. His voice had lost all the calm from before. It was low, clipped, urgent, like a man who had seen what power did when cornered. "This wasn't just exposing a scandal. You've set fire to their whole ecosystem." Kylian didn't flinch. He was drenched in sweat beneath his black turtleneck, not from nerves but from release. Every fiber of his body felt lighter, sharper, as if a decade-long silence had been exhaled in a single breath. "They should have come for me years ago," he said, unbuttoning the top of his collar. "But now the world is watching." From behind, his mother approached, flanked by Matuidi and the forensic analyst, whose laptop had just been taken by a team of international legal observers to begin preliminary investigation. "They'll say you fabricated everything," she said. "They'll drag me, Hakimi. Maybe even players you haven't spoken to in years." "I know." Kylian turned to her. "But it's not just about clearing my name anymore." Back in Paris, the PSG headquarters was in chaos. Nasser Al-Khelaifi sat alone in his private office, blinds closed, phone buzzing non-stop on the desk before him. Every time it lit up, the name on the screen sent another chill down his spine. Qatar Emir's chief of staff, French finance ministry, UEFA, Nike, FIFA. Emails piled up, statements pending. But he wasn't reading them. His eyes were locked on a paused video on the wall screen. Kylian's face frozen mid-sentence, eyes burning with a truth that had slipped past his control. He reached for the bottle of whiskey on the table. Not his usual vintage. This one was unopened until today. He poured 2 fingers worth into the glass and downed it all before it even touched his tongue. Then he picked up the phone and called someone he hadn't spoken to in 6 years. "Activate the fallback plan," he said. "You sure?" I said activate it." In a villa on the outskirts of Milan, an older man answered a burner phone and lit a cigarette with trembling fingers. On the other end, the voice was metallic, distorted. "Mbappé went public. Already?" He exhaled. "They're coming for the club. They might come for you too." The man sighed. "Let them. I've got tapes from 2017 they never scrubbed. If I go down, so does Qatar. You'd better pray he never gets his hands on them." Meanwhile, Kylian sat in a car headed back to the private airport. Window cracked open. The Geneva air was cold, clean, uncorrupted. For now. Blaise Matuidi was on the phone beside him, speaking fast in Italian to a journalist in Milan who promised to publish a follow-up exclusive. Zidane sat in the front, dead silent, scanning the streets like a soldier expecting an ambush. But Kylian's focus was on the phone in his hand. There were new messages. From Neymar, "Proud of you, brother. Took guts." From Hakimi, "Careful. They'll come for your family. Keep them close." From an unknown number, "You think you've won. You've just made yourself a bigger target. One bullet can end a revolution." He stared at that one the longest. It didn't scare him, but it reminded him of everything he was up against. It wasn't just Al-Khalifi. It was a whole machine. Oil money, broadcast monopolies, state-level immunity. He turned to Zidane. "Do you think they'll try to kill me?" Zidane hesitated before answering. "They won't do it directly. But yes, if they can ruin you, discredit you, isolate you, they'll do it. And if none of that works..." He looked at Kylian in the rearview. "You already know the answer." "I don't regret it," Kylian said. "I didn't say you should." That night, at a secured estate near Nice, Kylian sat alone in the garden. The stars above were so many, so dense, it looked like the sky itself had cracked open. He didn't sleep. He just listened. To the wind, to the faint waves in the distance, and to the past. Every conversation with Nasser, every time he was told to keep quiet, every time he had to smile while someone else twisted the story. And then came the call. "Do not hang up." The voice was filtered again. Male. Precise. "You've started something that can't be undone." Kylian didn't answer. "Walk away now and we'll let it go. You'll get your transfer. Your image will be cleaned. The club will take the fall. But if you continue, if you drag this out, we will bury you under everything you love." Kylian stood, walking back into the estate's stone hallway, voice unwavering. "You already tried that, and I'm still standing. You think you're the first to try this?" "No," he said, "but I'll be the first to finish it." There was a pause, then laughter. "You're not untouchable anymore, Mbappé." Kylian's reply was simple. "Neither are you." He hung up, and in the darkness of that estate, with every shadow stretched by moonlight, Kylian opened his laptop and started a new file. It was labeled, "The Full Story." Tomorrow he would name names. The following morning, Paris burned with headlines. Every digital screen on the Champs-Élysées blinked with words like rebellion, expose, and Mbappé versus Al-Khalifi. The war has no referee. Reporters camped outside the PSG headquarters while helicopters hovered above the club's training center, desperate to catch even the shadow of Nasser Al-Khalifi, who hadn't been seen in public since the Geneva conference. On social media, Mbappé's name trended with over 75 million mentions in 24 hours. But behind the digital explosion, something more sinister churned beneath the surface. At a private villa near Nice, Kylian Mbappé sat at a heavy oak desk, eyes bloodshot, fingers buried in the keys of his laptop. He hadn't slept, not because of fear but because of memory. He was writing everything down, every meeting, every verbal threat, every moment when silence had been bought or forced. Zidane had told him to be meticulous. Every sentence needed to be undeniable. As he typed, Matuidi stepped into the room holding a tablet. His face was pale. They published the statement, he said, setting the device down. From PSG. And Nasser. Kylian clicked play. Nasser appeared on screen, wearing a perfectly tailored navy suit, surrounded by golden curtains and two flags, PSG and Qatar. Let me be clear. Nasser's voice rang with icy calm. Paris Saint-Germain condemns the irresponsible behavior and unfounded accusations made by Mr. Mbappé. We are saddened by the falsehoods, the violation of trust, and the damage done to a club that has given this young man everything. He paused, then added with deliberate venom. When you give someone everything, and they betray you, it is not just sport that suffers. It is family. Kylian scoffed. Family? He muttered, standing up. He called me family after threatening to leak my brother's hospital records if I didn't show up to training camp. They think I'm stupid. Matuidi looked up. There's more. Kylian turned. They're suing you for defamation. They want 150 million euros in damages, and they're petitioning UEFA to freeze your career until the case is settled. Kylian laughed. A bitter, sharp, almost unhinged laugh. They're trying to erase me. They're trying to make an example of you, Matuidi corrected. So no other player ever opens their mouth again. Outside, Zidane was waiting. He had just gotten off the phone with a legal contact in Spain. When Kylian stepped into the garden, Zidane didn't offer comfort. Just facts. There's a dossier in Qatar. Sealed. Contains a full psychological report about you. From 2018. They had a private team analyze your behavior. After the World Cup. Kylian froze. I never consented to anything like that. They didn't need your consent. They used medical proxy from a clause in your first professional contract. You were 17. They've had it for years. They're preparing to leak it. Frame you as unstable. Kylian looked away, chest rising. They're going to say I'm paranoid. They're going to say you're dangerous, volatile, that your behavior since Geneva is proof you've lost grip with reality. He turned back to Zidane, fists clenched. Let them. I'll release the emails, the bank records. I'll name every politician who protected them. I don't care if they bury me. I'll claw my way out and drag them with me. Zidane looked at him with something close to pride. You don't need to. You're not alone anymore. At that moment, Kylian's phone rang again. This time it was unexpected.
Sergio Ramos.
Kylian answered without hesitation. I saw the statement, Sergio said, voice sharp. I told you before, brother. These people don't fight fair. I'm ready, Kylian replied.
No.
You're not. Not for what they're planning next. They're going after your father. Kylian stopped breathing for a moment. What? There's a document being leaked tonight about his coaching license. They're accusing him of falsifying credentials, of accepting under-the-table payments from PSG during your academy years. Kylian's voice dropped to a whisper. That's a lie. Of course it is. But they're not looking for truth. They're looking for noise. You want my advice?
No.
You're going to get it anyway. Find the others. The ones who've stayed silent. Players, staff, coaches, agents. If they're going to drown you, make sure you're holding a flood. That evening, in a secure video call set up by a whistleblower organization, Kylian stared at a screen split into 6 faces. All blurred. All voices modified. The first to speak was a woman. I was the team nutritionist from 2014 to 2020. I was asked to falsify medical reports before Champions League matches. A man followed. I was a translator. I overheard conversations between Nasser and a UEFA rep discussing match officials. After I reported it, I was deported. Another face. I worked security. We were ordered to plant cameras in the players' apartments during away games. They said it was for safety. But I knew better. One by one, the testimonies poured out. Terrified. Real. Kylian wrote everything down. Cross-checked timelines. Verified names. It wasn't just a case anymore. It was a movement. But before the call ended, one final face appeared.
Nobler.
No voice modification. It was Hakimi. You shouldn't be fighting this alone, he said. They tried to buy my silence. Sent someone to my family's house. Threatened to deport my cousin if I spoke out. What did you say? Kylian asked. I told them to deport the whole bloodline if they wanted. Because I'm done being quiet. Kylian smiled. Good, he said. Because the next time I speak, it won't be at a press conference. It'll be in a courtroom. And for the first time in years, the most expensive footballer in the world stopped being a brand and became a weapon. The rain fell in sheets over Paris that night, smearing city lights into bleeding rivers down the windows of the legal chambers where the first emergency hearing was scheduled. The courtroom hadn't opened to the public yet. But outside, journalists lined the streets like soldiers waiting for a signal to attack. They weren't just here for Kylian Mbappé. They were here for a spectacle. They wanted blood on the marble floors, power undone in front of flashing cameras. Inside, Kylian sat at the defense table staring straight ahead. His hair was damp from the walk through the side entrance. He refused an umbrella. The storm outside didn't compare to the one raging inside him. Across the room, Nasser Al-Khelaifi finally showed his face. The moment their eyes met, time stopped. You're early, Kylian said under his breath as Nasser walked past his table. I wanted to see how a child behaves when he thinks he's a martyr, Nasser replied, smiling without warmth. Kylian's lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Elodie Marchand, leaned in. He'll try to provoke you. Don't respond. He's desperate. I want him to, Kylian whispered. I want the world to hear him speak without a script. The judge entered moments later. The court stood. The silence that followed felt suffocating. The first motions were read, but no one was really listening. What mattered came next. The judge cleared her throat. Mr. Mbappé, you are here today because you've released material accusing Mr. Al-Khelaifi and Paris Saint-Germain FC of multiple criminal activities, including financial corruption, personal threats, and surveillance. Do you wish to confirm these accusations on record? Kylian stood, jaw clenched, voice steady. Ido. Nasser leaned back, arms crossed. And I deny all of it. Of course you do, Kylian shot back before Elodie could stop him. You've denied everything for years, haven't you? You denied leaking my father's private records. You denied threatening my mother. You denied burying the death of Serge Benaissa behind fake autopsy results. You denied the surveillance, the abuse, the control. Kylian, the judge warned. I'm not finished, Kylian said louder. You told me once that loyalty was everything. But loyalty to what? A club? Or a man who thinks he owns the air we breathe? Nasser didn't flinch. You're just a player, he said. Remember that. Kylian stepped forward, just inside the bounds of the microphone.
No.
I was your prisoner. Your campaign. Your trophy. But not anymore. Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. Reporters scribbled faster. The judge banged her gavel for order. But the electricity couldn't be contained. Later that day, the court took a recess. Outside, thunder rolled above the Palais de Justice as Elodie pulled Kylian aside. There's a witness. Wants to testify. Who? They won't say. But they said one phrase. I was in the room the night the bribe was paid. Kylian blinked. The bribe? The UEFA one. 2020 Champions League semi-final.
PSG versus Leipzig.
He inhaled sharply. I remember that night. Nasser disappeared right before kickoff. They're ready to speak. But they need your protection. Full immunity. You can grant that if we move it to a federal tribunal. Do it. As they walked back into the building, Kylian's phone buzzed. A new message. No sender ID. Just a sentence that made his blood run cold. If that witness speaks, your brother won't see tomorrow. He stopped walking. Matuidi, who'd rejoined them for the second hearing, noticed immediately. What is it? Kylian showed him the screen. Matuidi's voice dropped. We need to move Ethan. Now. He's still in Bondi, Kylian whispered. School should have just ended. I'll call Hakimi.
No.
I'll go. You can't leave now. They'll spin it like you're running. I don't care. 10 minutes later, Kylian was in an unmarked van, headed through winding Paris backstreets toward the suburb he grew up in. With him were 2 private security agents and a silence so thick it felt alive. He didn't speak. He didn't blink. He stared at the raindrops racing down the window and prayed the next message wouldn't be worse. When they reached Ethan's school, the guards fanned out. Kylian ran inside himself. Past stunned teachers, past confused students. He found his brother in the gym, alone, practicing free throws. "Kylian?" Ethan asked, startled. He didn't answer. He grabbed Ethan by the shoulder and pulled him into a hug so tight the boy gasped. "Are you okay?" Kylian asked.
Yeah.
"Why?" "You're going home. With me. Right now." Ethan stared at him. "What's happening?" Kylian didn't answer. He couldn't. Not yet. Back at the villa, Zidane was already waiting. When Kylian entered with Ethan, the older man's face darkened. "You got the message." Kylian nodded. "They're moving to intimidation." They already were. This is just their next level. Zidane handed him a folder. "The witness just sent this. It's not just testimony. It's a list of every official Nasser's team paid off since 2015. Referees, agents, journalists, even 2 government aides." Kylian flipped through the pages. Names he recognized. Names he once trusted. "They'll kill for this," he said. "They already have." That night, Kylian stood on the balcony of the estate, phone in hand, staring into the dark valley below. He opened his Instagram live. No press.
No sponsors.
Just his face. Raw. Unfiltered. "I'm speaking to you all, not as a footballer, but as a son, a brother, a human being. I know many of you think I'm attacking something sacred, but I'm not. I'm defending it. Defending the soul of this sport. I don't want your sympathy. I want your eyes open." He ended the live with 5 words. "Tell the world who you really are." The next morning, the witness arrived at court. Without a mask, without voice distortion. It was Gianluca Rocchi, former FIFA referee, and his first words before the judge made the entire courtroom gasp. "Nasser Al-Khelaifi offered me €1 million in cash to alter the outcome of a Champions League match. I accepted it. And I'm here today because I refuse to be a liar one more day." The courtroom erupted before Gianluca Rocchi could even finish his next sentence. A thunderous mix of gasps, shouted objections, and the rapid-fire clicking of cameras exploded in every corner of the chamber. The judge slammed her gavel again and again, but control was gone. No one had expected it, least of all Nasser Al-Khelaifi, who sat as if a glacier had pierced through his spine. Kylian Mbappé didn't flinch. He didn't move. He stared straight into Nasser's face, waiting, watching. "You should have silenced me when you had the chance," he whispered under his breath. On the stand, Rocchi held nothing back. "I officiated the semi-final between PSG and Leipzig in 2020. 48 hours before the match, I was flown privately to Doha. I was told it was a courtesy, that the Emir would meet me. Instead, I was locked in a hotel suite. 2 men came in dressed in PSG gear with briefcases. No names, no direct threats, just a choice. The game had to end in PSG's favor. Yellow cards to slow Leipzig down. Foul calls to break their rhythm. And a promise, do this and my family would be protected. Decline and I'd lose everything. I took the money. I followed the script." One of the court clerks dropped his pen. The judge looked like she might be sick. "I live with that shame every day," Rocchi said, voice shaking. "But this kid," he pointed at Kylian, "he's risking everything for the truth. If I stay silent now, I'm just a corpse pretending to be a man." Nasser's lawyer stood. "This is outrageous. There's no proof, no. There are emails." Rocchi cut in, voice hardening. "Encrypted transfers. Shadow accounts. Hotel footage. I've turned them over to the tribunal. And I'll take a polygraph on live television if that's what it takes." Nasser finally broke his silence. "You're a disgraced ref looking for redemption." Rocchi snapped his head toward him. "You should know what that feels like. Except you're not looking for redemption. Just another escape." Kylian stood now. His voice, low and blistering, echoed through the stunned courtroom. You paid him to fix a match. Just like you paid media outlets to spin my story. Just like you paid private security firms to stalk my mother. You don't run a football club. You run a regime. Nasser stood too. You ungrateful little boy. I was a boy, Kylian shot back. When I signed my soul away to you. Now I'm a man, and I want it back. The judge ordered a recess. Chaos reigned outside. Protesters had gathered by the hundreds. Some wore PSG scarves. Others held signs, "Let Kylian speak. Football is not for sale. Investigate Al-Khalifi now." The police formed a perimeter, but the energy couldn't be contained. A movement was born, and it didn't ask for permission. Back inside the villa that night, Kylian sat in front of 3 laptops. On one screen, a real-time feed from a journalist in Madrid compiling data from the Rocky testimony. On another, a call with his legal team in Zurich. And on the third, a paused video surveillance footage from 2019, the one that changed everything. It was from inside the PSG medical wing. 2 men in suits, a doctor, and a familiar voice. Don't list the injury as severe. If the public thinks Mbappé's knee is deteriorating, our leverage dies. Keep it grade 1. The doctor nodded silently. Kylian stared at the screen, his jaw tight. They lied about my body, he whispered. They risked my career to control the narrative. Zidane entered with Hakimi, who had just landed from Morocco, visibly exhausted, but charged with purpose. There's something you need to know, Zidane said. What now? Kylian muttered. Nasser's filed an emergency request with FIFA. He's trying to ban you from participating in any competition, pending a psychological evaluation. Kylian laughed. Cold. Quiet. They're trying to make me look insane. They've already got 3 media outlets lined up to report on your erratic behavior, Hakimi added. They're painting you as obsessed, delusional, a ticking time bomb. Kylian turned to the mirror across the room. He looked into his own eyes like they belonged to a stranger. Maybe I am a bomb, he said, but they lit the fuse. He reached for the folder on the table, one marked confidential. Player Exploitation Agreement, 2017 to 2022. Inside were documents signed under pressure, with clauses that didn't even hold up under international labor laws. How many kids signed away their future because of this? He asked, holding it up. Too many, Zidane replied. And most won't speak. I don't need most. I just need one. The next morning, a teenage player from the PSG Youth Academy came forward anonymously. He didn't speak at a press conference. He didn't post a video. He leaked a voice memo. It was his father, talking to a PSG scout. We'll make sure your son plays, but you need to sign the full clause. And tell him not to speak to the media about the injections. We don't want another Kylian situation. You understand. That audio spread across the globe like a virus. Kylian didn't even have to speak. He watched the world speak for him. Sponsors began dropping. Not from him, from PSG. French senators demanded an inquiry into Ligue 1's management. A former UEFA official fled to Iceland, issuing a written confession. And Nasser? He retreated to Doha, only to discover the emir had suspended his travel privileges pending a royal review. He wasn't untouchable anymore. At sunset, Kylian stood on the balcony again. But this time he wasn't alone. His brother, his mother, Zidane, Hakimi, Matuidi. He looked at them and said what he had held in his chest for years. I used to think silence was survival, but it's just another kind of death. And for the first time since the war began, he allowed himself to cry. Not for weakness, but for freedom finally coming into view. The phone rang twice before Kylian answered. He didn't recognize the number. He almost didn't pick up. But something in his gut told him not to ignore this one. Not tonight. A deep voice greeted him. You've got less than 48 hours before the judge rules on the injunction. If it goes through, you'll be banned from every pitch in Europe. Kylian didn't speak. The voice continued. But I can make it disappear. Who is this? I work for someone you once trusted. Someone who still believes this can be salvaged. Kylian leaned forward in his chair. The estate was dark behind him. Everyone else had gone to sleep. The only light came from the screen in front of him, still displaying the file titled UEFA Internal Corruption. Witness number 3. You mean salvaged for PSG? Kylian said slowly. Salvaged for football, the voice said. You've turned a sport into a court case. Fans are angry. Investors are nervous. The media is shifting. Good, Kylian snapped. They should be nervous. You think you're helping? I think I'm telling the truth. There was a pause. Then the voice dropped its calm. You're going to lose everything. I already did. The line went dead. The next morning, Kylian was up before dawn, sitting on the stone steps of the estate garden with Zidane. The older man handed him a thermos of black coffee and lit a cigarette. Neither spoke for a moment. You were reckless last night, Zidane finally said. I'm always reckless when I'm right. You're putting your family in danger. They're in danger either way. Zidane didn't argue. He took a slow drag, then looked straight ahead. There's something else. It's about Neymar. Kylian turned sharply. What about him? He reached out, privately, said he's willing to testify, but he wants protection. He knows about the offshore accounts. He signed contracts under pressure too. He won't go public. He might, if you ask him. Later that day, Kylian called him. The line was quiet for a long time before Neymar's voice finally cracked through the static. You really want me to do this? They'll call me a liar either way, Kylian said. But if you speak, it becomes history. They'll destroy me in Brazil. They already tried to destroy us in France. Another long pause. Then, you're insane, Neymar whispered. But maybe that's what we needed. Then say it, Kylian said. Say the thing we never said. Neymar exhaled. We weren't players. We were products. That night, Neymar posted a cryptic tweet.
No caption.
Just a picture of a locked briefcase with the PSG logo barely visible under the zipper. It trended instantly. The internet broke again. Inside a hotel in Geneva, Nasser Al-Khelaifi watched the chaos unfold. His aides were frantic. Emails flooded in. One from the emir himself. It wasn't a greeting. It was a question. Did you lose him? Nasser crushed the phone in his hand and stood up. We need to push the final file. No, one aide said, pale. It's not verified. I don't care. But it'll implicate the Qatari fund. I don't care. Back in Paris, a new scandal broke within hours. A 90-page document leaked online, supposedly proving Kylian Mbappé had received illegal bonus payments from an undisclosed third-party entity tied to a betting firm. The headlines exploded. Mbappé caught in shadow sponsorship scheme? New evidence ties star to undisclosed funds. Mbappé not so innocent after all? But the document was fake. Within 3 hours, the betting company denied any connection. The formatting was traced to a PR firm long suspected to be used by PSG. Kylian didn't react publicly. He released no statement. Instead, he posted a photo on his Instagram story. Black background, white text. You forged my name. Let's see how many others you've forged. Within 2 hours, his legal team announced they had obtained internal PSG files showing doctored contracts dating back to 2016. Players, coaches, even junior analysts. Signatures altered. Clauses inserted after signing. Entire paragraphs replaced. That night, 3 more former players stepped forward. One broke down crying on live TV. They told me if I didn't sign, my family wouldn't be safe. Inside a dim room in Doha, Nasser watched every second. His eyes were no longer calm, no longer cruel. They were wild, lost. They're turning him into a god, he muttered. No, someone replied behind him. You did. The next day, the judge denied the injunction. Kylian Mbappé would remain legally eligible to play football in any federation under UEFA jurisdiction. He walked out of the courthouse to a roar of supporters. But there was no smile on his face. He wasn't celebrating. He wasn't done. He leaned into the microphone. You tried to break me, so now I'll burn it all. And he walked away. Because the next step wasn't about football. It was about justice. And the world was finally listening. The world watched. Not just fans, not just journalists, presidents, CEOs, human rights lawyers, retired players, agents, whistleblowers. What had started as a football controversy was now a global indictment of an entire system, and Kylian Mbappé stood in the eye of the storm. But the sky wasn't calming. It was darkening, deeper, more violent. And this time it was personal. At 3:12 a.m., Kylian's phone rang again. Leave Paris. Now. The voice was familiar. Hoarse. Panicked.
Luis.
Kylian sat up in bed, heart pounding. What are you talking about? They broke into your uncle's apartment. No one was hurt, but they left a message on the wall. What message? Luis Campos's voice cracked. Talk again and your blood will be our ink. Kylian's blood ran cold. He was out of bed before he could process the words, already pulling a hoodie over his head, dialing his mother and brother at the same time. Downstairs, Zidane was already waiting. They're making it personal now, he said grimly. They crossed the line, Kylian muttered. No more press conferences. No more courtrooms. If they want a war, I'll bring one to their front door. Zidane didn't flinch. You sure? I'm done playing their game. Before the sun rose, Kylian was in a bunker beneath the French Ministry of Justice, a secure facility reserved for witnesses under threat. Not even the press knew he was there. Only a handful of people had been told, and even fewer knew what was about to be unleashed. A classified archive of 1,027 files was being decrypted. Not from a whistleblower. From an anonymous drop point located in Luxembourg, uploaded through a satellite VPN route that hadn't been cracked by any nation's intelligence service yet. What the documents revealed wasn't just a club gone rogue. It was a blueprint. For decades, select clubs across Europe, PSG, City, Juve, and others, had allegedly been part of a shadow syndicate, a quiet, contractual agreement between private investors, broadcasters, and sovereign funds. Everything was mapped. Player careers, match outcomes, refereeing assignments. And at the center of it, PSG. With Al-Khelafi not as a football president, but a strategist in a geopolitical empire masked by sport. When Kylian scrolled through the folder marked Classified, Operation Silence / 2017 to 2023, he didn't speak for 10 minutes, just stared. His hands shook. His throat went dry. The folder included a transcript from a meeting in 2021. His name came up 17 times. They called me a wild card, he said aloud. They said if I didn't renew, they'd crush my family's financial history, freeze my mother's bank, bury me in legal debt. And they would've, Zidane replied, if you hadn't gotten louder. Kylian looked at the final document. It was titled Asset Reacquisition Plan, KM Transfer Prevention Protocol. It was dated 5 days before his last contract extension. It was never a negotiation, he muttered. It was an ambush. In Geneva, FIFA's ethics committee had already convened an emergency panel. But the damage was beyond governance now. It was cultural, spiritual, political. And in Qatar, the royal family had reportedly ordered an internal audit of all transactions tied to PSG since 2011. Nasser's face disappeared from every official PSG social account within hours. But the silence only made things louder. Because Kylian wasn't finished. He sent one final encrypted file to Le Monde, El País, The Guardian, and Al Jazeera. Inside it, voice recordings. Internal calls between PSG board members. A 34-minute video feed from a private server showing illegal biometric data tracking of youth players at the club's training facility. At 9:05 a.m. the next day, the world exploded again. The French government issued a formal inquiry. UEFA suspended PSG from all European competitions pending a full investigation. And FIFA? They had no choice but to admit that evidence pointed to unprecedented violations of ethical boundaries. But none of that compared to what happened at Parc des Princes that night. Kylian showed up, unannounced. No jersey, just a black coat, a silver microphone, and a crowd of 60,000 stunned into silence. He walked to the center circle, alone. A single spotlight followed him, and he spoke. I came to this club as a kid who believed in something. In family. In dreams. In the love of the game. But what I found was a machine. A system designed not to inspire but to control. And now that machine is breaking. He paused. The silence was unbearable. Some people said I should have kept quiet. That I should have protected the club. Protected the league.
Protected France.
But silence is not patriotism. Silence is complicity. He turned slowly, facing each side of the stadium. You gave me your love, and they tried to use it against you. They turned my face into a brand, my body into a billboard. But I am not a product. I am not a prisoner. I am a voice, and I will never be quiet again. The crowd didn't cheer. They wept, because they finally saw him, not as a star, but as a man who bled the truth they'd been afraid to speak. And when he walked off that pitch, he didn't walk out of football. He walked into history, because in that moment Kylian Mbappé didn't just end a chapter. He burned the entire book. The storm didn't stop. Not after the speech. Not after the documents. Not after PSG's collapse rippled through every newsroom from Paris to Seoul. And yet, as the world dissected the fallout, charts, statements, leaks, tribunals, Kylian Mbappé wasn't in a courtroom. He wasn't on a screen. He wasn't even in France. He had vanished, until he appeared again. Unannounced, live on primetime television, across 32 countries, sitting alone in a bare studio, no lights except the ones trained directly on his face. There were no handlers.
No sponsors. No script.
Just Kylian. And a camera. They asked me why I disappeared. He began. The truth is, I didn't. I was watching. Watching the apologies. The edits. The men who tried to erase me rewriting their own history like they were the victims. But now that the world has decided what it thinks, I want to say something that I haven't said to anyone. Not my family. Not Zidane. Not even Hakimi. He looked up, straight into the lens. I wasn't trying to be a hero. I was trying to survive. The studio fell silent. When I was 17, they gave me a contract that said, lifetime loyalty bonus. I thought it meant love. They meant ownership. When I was 19, I found out my phone had been cloned by a third-party company with a fake sponsor's name. Every message, every call monitored. They said it was a mistake. A glitch. I said nothing. I kept playing. I kept scoring. He rubbed his hands together, staring down at the table. And when I was 22, I was told that if I didn't sign the renewal, they would leak personal medical records about my father. Records they were never supposed to have. I didn't know they were bluffing. I didn't know they'd already done worse to others. So I signed. And I died. His voice cracked slightly. Just once. I died in 1,000 commercials. I died in choreographed interviews. I died every time they told me to smile while lying about injuries. I died when they let a staff member who insulted my mother keep their job because he was valuable to the club. He leaned forward now, voice rising. I didn't go to war with PSG. I went to war with silence. I didn't break the sport. I exposed the fracture that was already there. If that makes me dangerous, good. The broadcast was picked up instantly by media outlets across the globe. But what no one expected was what happened next. A second feed appeared. Split screen. A woman. Older. Eyes tired, but defiant. Her name appeared at the bottom. Sofia Ben Yahia, former administrative coordinator at UEFA. I have something to add, she said, uninvited. I was part of the email chain that buried Mbappé's complaints about contract coercion. I saw the original files. I watched Nasser walk into that Zurich office with a briefcase. I watched a sport trade its soul for spectacle. A third screen, then a fourth. A chorus of faces. Former staff, youth players, physiotherapists, coaches. One by one they spoke. And Kylian just sat there. Not basking. Not crying. Just watching. Witnessing. Because it was no longer about him. It had never really been. Back in Doha, Nasser sat alone in a room of silence. All communications cut. No more calls. No more directives. Only static. The Emir had frozen his assets pending international review. Lawyers refused to pick up. Every move he made was now being traced, archived, dissected. He poured himself a drink, the same brand he once poured to toast Mbappé's record-breaking renewal, and stared at the television screen where the young man he once mocked now stood as a symbol. You said he was a child, a product, a pawn. Now he was a reckoning. In Paris, Zidane stood in the back of a theater, watching the broadcast like everyone else. Matuidi beside him. Neither spoke. There were no words left. Only the echo of a truth that had taken too long to arrive. The next day, Kylian released a personal letter. Not to FIFA, not to PSG, but to the fans. It read, "You cheered for me when I ran. You chanted my name when I scored. But what you never saw was what I gave away every time I put that shirt on. I gave away fear, dignity, family. I was told to be a champion. But I was never free. I am not your champion. I am your mirror. And if you don't like what you see, change the system. Don't wait for another kid to burn for your entertainment. Love the game, not the machine. And love the truth more than the team." The letter was printed on front pages across the world. That night, children across Europe walked onto their practice pitches with Kylian's quote written in Sharpie across their wrists. "I'm not a product." Some wore black armbands. Others played barefoot in protest of sponsors. In a small field in Bondy, a boy picked up a ball and looked to the sky. "Merci, Kylian," he whispered.
Pour le courage.
And far away, in a quiet villa with no staff, no cameras, and no stadium walls, Kylian Mbappé watched the stars. Not to be seen, but to remember what it felt like to breathe without permission.